You don't need to believe in signs for them to appear. You just need to notice. The moment you start asking deeper questions about your direction, your purpose, your alignment, shifts. Not because it's magical, but because it's responsive. You're not living in a dead, neutral world. You're living inside a reactive field, a matrix that listens and adjusts based on where your attention goes and how your energy moves. Most people miss this because they're too busy demanding certainty while ignoring the signals that are trying to guide them. Synchronicities aren't spiritual decorations. They're part of the operating system behind experience. You might think a repeating number is just a coincidence, or that running into the same idea 3 times in a week is just pattern bias. But what if it is? None of that. What if the universe doesn't use words? What if it uses echoes, sequences, and rhythm to signal that you're entering a window of change, or a timeline shift, or a moment of choice you won't recognize unless you've trained your inner ear to hear subtle instruction? This is not superstition. This is pattern intelligence. Synchronicities are not meant to impress you. They are meant to activate you, to call your perception back into precision. Because if your reality is reflecting you, then every synchronicity is a mirror, and every mirror is asking you to look, not just glance, to decode, not just admire. This video is a map, but it doesn't lead you outward. It leads you inward through the quantum intelligence that lives beneath logic, beneath language, beneath thought itself. And once you understand how to read this invisible system, you stop hoping for signs. You start conversing with the field directly, like a whisper that becomes a voice, like coincidence that becomes command. You are not here by accident. If these words are finding you, it's because part of you already knows. Reality has been speaking. You just haven't had the translation key until now. 1. The consciousness sensor that detects meaning. There's a reason some people see synchronicities everywhere while others never notice them. It's not about luck, and it's not about belief. It's about calibration. Every human mind is equipped with a built-in sensor, a subtle layer of perception designed to detect meaning beyond logic. Thoth called it the inner decoder. Modern science brushes close with concepts like the reticular activating system. But that's just the outer mechanism. The deeper truth is this: your consciousness is tuned, like a satellite, to certain frequencies of pattern. And those patterns speak in whispers most people mistake for background noise. This sensor isn't activated through effort. It awakens through awareness. When your attention sharpens, when emotional clarity increases, and when distractions fall away, this inner decoder begins picking up what's always been there. That feeling when a song plays, at the exact moment you need to hear its message. That moment when a stranger says something that answers a private question you haven't voiced. That chill that runs down your spine when something lines up too precisely to be random. That is the sensor lighting up. But here's the problem. For most, the sensor has been dulled. Constant scrolling, overstimulation, emotional suppression. All of it builds mental static. The more noise in your field, the harder it is to detect subtle patterns. You're not blind. You're flooded. You're not unworthy of signs. You're just unable to hear their signal through your own internal chaos. Thoth taught that restoring this sensor requires not belief, but hygiene. Mental hygiene, emotional regulation, breath, coherence, even physical stillness. These aren't mystical rituals. They're tuning practices. Every time you silence distraction and increase your presence, you improve the signal-to-noise ratio in your awareness. And with that clarity comes decoding power. The signs don't change. You do. What once looked random becomes precise. What once felt invisible becomes obvious. You start recognizing micro-patterns in timing, word choice, behavior shifts. Patterns that reflect back to you what your energy is projecting, what your thoughts are attracting, and what timeline you're aligning with. This doesn't mean paranoia or overanalysis. That's still ego trying to take control of something that was never meant to be controlled. The sensor works best in neutrality, in curiosity, not desperation. in stillness, not expectation. And when you hit that sweet spot, synchronicities stop feeling like occasional gifts. They'd become part of a conversation you didn't know you were having with the field all along. The more active the sensor becomes, the more clearly numbers begin to show up. And the next topic reveals why the universe loves math and what it's actually trying to say when it sends you 11. 11 again and again. 2. Decoding the numeric pulse of the universe. Numbers appear before meaning does, long before language shaped human thought. Quantity, rhythm, and sequence were already structuring reality. Thoth taught that numbers are not symbols invented by the mind, but signatures embedded into the fabric of existence. When numbers repeat in your awareness, it is not the universe trying to comfort you. It is the field, marking your position within a moving equation. Most people misunderstand numeric synchronicities because they approach them emotionally. They ask what a number means instead of why it appears now. Meaning comes later. Timing comes first. When you notice numbers like 1111, 222, 333, or unfamiliar sequences repeating across days or weeks, you are witnessing a pulse, a rhythmic feedback loop between your internal state and the larger mathematical order organizing events around you. Thoth described reality as a living calculus. Every thought carries weight. Every emotional state carries momentum. When your inner state reaches a certain threshold of coherence or tension, the field responds by echoing numerical patterns. These patterns function like markers on a map, telling you that your awareness has crossed a boundary. Sometimes that boundary is alignment. Sometimes it is instability. The number itself is neutral. The context is everything. When numbers appear during moments of clarity, calm, or decisive intention, they indicate stabilization. You are holding a frequency long enough for the field to acknowledge it. When numbers appear during confusion, anxiety, or obsession, they signal a loop. The mind is cycling without resolution. The field reflects repetition to make you aware of stagnation. In both cases, the number is diagnostic, not prophetic. This is why chasing number meanings leads people astray. Fixed interpretations turn living signals into dead superstition. Thoth warned initiates against memorizing meanings. He taught them to observe correlation. What were you thinking just before the number appeared? What emotional state were you inhabiting? What choice were you avoiding or preparing to make? Numbers appear at decision thresholds, not to choose for you, but to illuminate the moment you are standing in. Once you begin decoding numbers this way, their power sharpens. You stop romanticizing them and start using them as instruments of awareness. A repeated sequence becomes a pause button to stabilize attention, to return authority inward rather than projecting it outward onto fate. The deeper truth is this: numbers show up most when your mind is close to influencing a new outcome. They are not reassurance that everything will work out. They are pressure indicators, showing that the system is responsive to you right now. The universe does not send numbers to guide the lost. It sends them to those who are close to choosing. When you understand this, numeric synchronicities lose their mystery and gain their function. They become tools for timing, mirrors for coherence, and markers of readiness. And once you recognize numbers as pulses rather than messages, something else begins to surface. Repetitions not only in digits, but in events, locations, and moments in time itself. The next topic reveals why reality repeats itself when a lesson has not yet been integrated, and how time itself glitches to get your attention. 3. Signals hidden in time glitches and repetitions. When life starts to repeat, pay attention. When you visit a new place and feel like you've been there before. When a conversation unfolds exactly like one you had months ago. When a strange phrase or object reappears in unrelated contexts within a short span of time. These are not flukes. Punctures in linear experience designed to wake up your attention and force a question you've been avoiding. Am I really choosing this timeline? Thoth taught that reality is elastic. It bends, it echoes, and when consciousness remains unconscious, When lessons are avoided, choices postponed, alignment ignored, the timeline begins to loop, not the punies, but to reflect. These loops often appear as patterns, repeated arguments, the same type of relationship showing up in a new body, recurring financial crises, or déjà vu that hits harder than logic can explain. The field bends around your resistance until you see it. A time glitch is not a mistake. It's a ripple created when your inner vibration misaligns with the current you're trying to enter. The glitch appears to create friction, a moment of irregularity sharp enough to demand presence. It's the event you can't explain, but can't ignore. A missed appointment that leads to a fated meeting. A delay that reveals a truth. A technological error that forces stillness. Repetition, on the other hand, is the system's more patient approach. If glitches are sharp edges, repetitions are mirrors. Life keeps showing you the same structure until you step out of it. The same emotion, the same reaction, the same escape route. The repetition will continue, sometimes for years, because reality is not external. It's cooperative. It follows your unconscious instructions until you overwrite them consciously. Most people get stuck inside repetitions because they mistake familiarity for stability. They call it how things are instead of seeing the loop as a reflection of what hasn't been changed within. Thoth explained this using the metaphor of orbit. Every thought, emotion, behavior pattern becomes a gravitational loop. If no new signal disrupts it, the orbit continues. Synchronicity enters not to decorate the orbit, but to break it. When the same phrase shows up on a billboard, in a dream, and then in a stranger's conversation within 48 hours, something is being highlighted. The field is layering repetition to cut through your mental clutter, not to give you an answer, but to pull you into the question. Time does not repeat at random. It bends where you resist clarity. It echoes where you refuse awareness. It loops not to trap you, but to show you that you're sleepwalking. The signal is never outside you. The outer glitch is the symptom. The cause is within. Recognizing the loop is your first act of power. Disrupting it is your first act of authorship. And a tool to break it often comes through emotional voltage, the inner charge that magnetizes change. The next topic reveals why emotion is the true engine behind synchronicity, and how your unspoken feelings are summoning signs more than any thought ever could. 4. Emotional voltage and the appearance of signs. Synchronicities don't respond to words. They respond to charge, not what you think you want, but what you feel so strongly that it alters the texture of your field. Thoth taught that emotion is not just internal weather. It is magnetic voltage, and wherever voltage builds, the matrix listens, not because it's watching, but because it's wired to respond. This is why your most intense moments, heartbreak, hope, breakdown, surrender, are often surrounded by strange alignments. Songs that say exactly what you're feeling. People reaching out at the exact second you need them. Objects falling at the moment you make a decision. These are not random. These are emotional resonances, triggering environmental feedback. Most assume synchronicity is about thoughts. They try to manifest through mantras or visualizations, yet feel nothing, and wonder why nothing changes. But your emotional undercurrent is what codes the transmission. Thought is direction. Emotion is fuel. If the voltage isn't there, the field doesn't respond. If the signal is split, one part of you saying yes, the other leaking fear, the signal collapses in static. There's a reason signs appear when you're raw, when you're cracked open, when control has dropped, and you feel exposed. In those moments, the emotional volume is so high that the signal breaks through. Life responds, not because you earned it, but because you reached a resonance, an unfiltered, undistracted frequency that cuts through noise. But here's the paradox. Emotion also distorts, if not observed. Unprocessed fear amplifies false signals. If you're desperate, everything looks like a sign. If you're clinging, you'll see patterns where there's only projection. That's the danger of emotional chaos. It scrambles the radar. The key is not to eliminate emotion, it's to purify it. Thoth taught emotional voltage must be stabilized, not silenced. When you feel deeply, but stand calmly inside the feeling, your field becomes conductive, not reactive. That's when synchronicities arrive cleanly. They don't just repeat, they align with meaning. They point, they pulse, they guide. Because your inner field has become a coherent transmitter, not a static storm. This is why emotional awareness is non-negotiable. If you don't know what you're actually feeling, you can't trust the signs. And if you can't trust the signs, you lose the map. But when feeling is honest, unfiltered, and fully owned, the field responds with precision. The deeper your voltage, the clearer the signal. And sometimes, all it takes is one sharp emotional realization. One honest, internal shift to unlock a completely different outcome. The next topic shows how even the smallest internal pivot can trigger a ripple across your timeline, revealing a new path through synchronicities that appear instantly after a 5. The micro-shift that unlocks a parallel outcome. Massive changes don't always announce themselves. Sometimes it's a tiny internal shift that bends the timeline. A subtle choice, a breath held or released. A thought caught before it loops. Thoth taught that reality is not changed by dramatic effort, but by precise pivots made in moments of awareness. A microshift is not the explosion, it's the flick of the switch before the light. And when it happens, synchronicities move instantly, like pieces of a hidden structure clicking into place. You may think you're still in the same day, in the same routine, but something deeper has moved. You resisted an old pattern. You chose calm over control. You said no when silence would have been easier. These changes are small externally, but seismic internally, because they signify the end of one loop and the start of another, and the field feels it. Synchronicities respond to this micro-movement with elegance. A message shows up that reflects your new stance. An opportunity you didn't expect re-enters your orbit. A conversation changes tone. Even the quality of silence around you shifts, not because you forced anything, but because you aligned with something. You left the script. You stepped off the track. The power of the micro-shift is that it isn't reaction, it's authorship. You didn't move because you were triggered. You moved because something in you was finally clear. This clarity, however small, rewrites the timeline's immediate options. You exit the tunnel of probability you were in and step into a new one. A parallel outcome with new mirrors, new rules, new signals. People often expect transformation to look like fireworks. Thoth warned that this expectation is a trap. Real change is often quiet, unseen by others, missed by the old self, but the field doesn't miss it. It responds precisely, adjusting the reflection you walk into. Synchronicities, then, are not rewards. They are coordinates, confirming the shift is registered. The problem is, most miss these confirmations because they're looking for drama. They overlook the simplicity of a clean sign, a sentence heard twice. A person you hadn't thought of in years suddenly appears. A decision you've avoided for months suddenly feels light. These are not coincidences. These are time response mechanisms. One aligned breath, one conscious gesture, one new response to an old trigger. That's all it takes to change everything. The system is that responsive. But not all signals come from space, time, or sensation. Some of the most powerful synchronicities come through people living carriers of frequency who enter briefly, but shift everything. The next topic reveals how random individuals are sometimes placed in your field as signals in disguise, and how to recognize them when they appear. 6. How random people are placed as living signals. You think it's just a conversation, a passing moment. a stranger at the store. But some people don't enter your reality by chance. They are placed, not by fate or divine puppetry, but by the synchronization of fields. When your inner state shifts, the outer field adjusts. And one of the fastest, most direct forms of response is through a human carrier. Someone whose presence contains the exact signal your consciousness needs to register. Thoth taught that not all synchronicities come as signs. Some come as people. Brief appearances, a sentence dropped into your life like a code, a question that pierces your surface, a tone of voice that stops your internal dialogue. You don't know why this person matters, but something in you freezes, softens, or unlocks. That's the frequency match. You've encountered a signal in human form. These are not always spiritual teachers or wise guides. Sometimes they are unaware participants. A driver who cuts you off at the perfect moment to delay a mistake. A barista who says something that echoes your private thought. A person online whose comment shifts your whole perception, though they never meant to. Their intention is irrelevant. It's your recognition that matters. The field uses people as signal mirrors because humans carry complex resonance, tone, rhythm, presence, timing. These subtleties can trigger realizations that static symbols cannot. You might have ignored the billboard, but the woman who looked you in the eye and said that one phrase, Thoth, landed. That's the delivery. And you've done this too. You've been the signal for others, without knowing it. A comment you forgot making, a post you almost didn't publish, a conversation you had no idea would ripple for someone else. You're not just receiving signs. Sometimes you are the sign. But to perceive this layer of synchronicity, your inner sensor must be still enough to feel resonance. The emotional or energetic response that arises when someone enters your field carrying a charge. It's rarely dramatic. It's subtle. A momentary dilation of awareness, a breath that feels out of place, a sentence that lingers longer than it should. These are traces, evidence that something passed between you and the mirror. Mistaking everyone for a message creates delusion. Ignoring the message inside everyone creates blindness. The middle path is presence. You observe the interaction, feel for the signature, and allow the echo to unfold. Not by force. Be resonance. When you understand this, you begin moving through life differently. Every encounter becomes potential data, not to analyze, to sense, to decode, to extract alignment. And sometimes, even when people are absent, the world speaks through space walls, windows, songs, street names, fragments of meaning scattered all around you. The next topic reveals how life arranges your environment to speak, and how to hear the invisible language hidden in overheard words and physical siete. Overheard messages and spatial symbolism. The world around you isn't passive. It's coded. Every space you enter holds potential transmission points, and every moment contains threads of pattern that can activate if your awareness is sharp enough. Thoth taught that space is not just a backdrop. It is a field of embedded messages, waiting to be read by those who are present enough to receive. You've felt it before. A random sentence from a conversation you weren't part of suddenly hits like it was meant for you. A lyric playing through a crack in the wall carries an answer you hadn't voiced. A phrase appears on a truck, a wall, a digital feed, and it names exactly what you've been struggling to articulate. This isn't madness. This is field feedback, organized through spatial geometry and timing precision. Most think the universe speaks in signs, as if they were placed like Easter eggs. But synchronicity is not decoration. It's reflection. When your awareness sharpens, it begins to resonate with external echoes of your own inner field. The more coherent your thought-emotion structure, the more efficiently the environment mirrors it back in symbol. The key isn't to chase meaning in everything. That path leads to delusion. The key is to listen with still attention, to feel for dissonance when a word pierces your internal silence, when a visual symbol lingers in your vision longer than it should, when a melody loops at the perfect time. Don't dismiss it. Pause. Trace back what you were thinking, feeling, or about to choose. The field doesn't need a voice. It uses your location, your timing, and your emotional charge to wrap messages into the atmosphere you already inhabit. When that atmosphere holds still, you receive. But most are too distracted to notice. Their minds are loud, seeking grand signs while missing the subtle design pulsing all around them. Thoth taught that mastery of this layer doesn't come from memorizing meanings, but from building symbolic sensitivity. You begin to notice architecture differently. Graffiti, colors, textures, numbers on a door, all become elements of a message board shaped by your vibration. The field doesn't speak in sentences. It speaks in arrangement, the sequence of things, their repetition, their proximity. And once you begin noticing this, it feels like the world is alive in a new way. A song isn't just background noise. A wall isn't just concrete. A sentence overheard isn't just random language. It's all being organized in front of you, not for you, because of you. But this decoding power depends on one thing: clarity. If your mind is cluttered, the signals blur. The cleaner your internal space, the sharper the external reflections. The next topic reveals how your internal signal-to-noise ratio determines what you can perceive, and why synchronicities never vanish, but are often drowned out by your own mental static. 8. The signal-to-noise ratio of your mind. You're not waiting for signs. They're already everywhere. But the real question is, can you actually receive them? Thoth taught that synchronicity is never absent. It is always transmitting. What determines whether you catch it isn't luck, timing, or spiritual worthiness. It's mental noise. Your internal atmosphere acts as a filter, and if it's overloaded, the signals of the field will never break through. Every thought you don't question, every worry you rehearse, every comparison, judgment, unresolved emotion, it's all signal interference. The more chaotic your mind, the more scrambled the incoming reflections. You could be standing in the middle of a perfect moment, surrounded by mirrored alignment, and still miss it. Not because the signs weren't there, but because your frequency was tuned to distortion. Think of your mind as a radio. When tuned clearly, it receives. When mistuned, all you get is static. But unlike a radio, your dial isn't physical. It's shaped by your emotional regulation, your attention, discipline, and your breath coherence. Most people's minds are so scattered they can't hold a single point of stillness long enough to detect the pattern weaving in front of them. They live in anticipation of signs, while drowning them in mental debris. Thoth didn't teach his initiates to look for signs. He trained them to become still enough to recognize what was always speaking. Silence isn't passive. It's receptive dominance. When the noise drops, pattern becomes visible. Your environment sharpens. Timing aligns. Words hit harder. Colors feel more alive. Repetition stands out. What once felt mundane begins to pulse. But achieving this isn't about meditating in isolation. It's about disentangling from mental clutter in real time. Catching thoughts before they spiral. Disrupting unconscious narratives. Redirecting breath when the nervous system contracts. These are tuning acts. Micro adjustments that reduce interference and reawaken perception. You don't need a silent mind. You need a stable signal. One clear enough to distinguish a true synchronicity from emotional projection. That's the danger of a noisy mind. It produces false positives. It makes you chase meaning where there is none, just to feed the illusion of progress. But when the signal is clean, you don't chase anything. The field meets you. This is the shift. You move from seeking to sensing, from effort to reception. And the signs no longer appear as surprises. They become feedback, precise, rhythmic, and unmistakable. And once this inner signal is stabilized, something deeper activates. You begin to witness how your coherent state turns life into a mirror, and every part of reality begins to reflect you with surgical precision. The next topic reveals the mechanics behind this phenomenon, how the field becomes a quantum mirror when your inner world reaches vibrational clarity. 9. The language of the quantum mirror. You are always inside a mirror, not a reflective surface, but a reactive field that echoes the structure of your consciousness. Thoth taught that reality is not a sequence of disconnected events, It is a quantum mirror, fluid and instantaneous, reshaping itself to reflect the dominant tone of your inner world. Every thought you stabilize, every emotion you repeat, every belief you energize. These don't just stay inside. They imprint into the field and return to you through events, encounters, symbols, and But the mirror doesn't reflect the surface thoughts. It reflects what's constant underneath. That's why affirmations that aren't felt fall flat. That's why desperate prayers go unanswered. The mirror speaks frequency, not language. It reflects your truth, not your opinion. And the deeper the truth is anchored, even if it's unconscious, the more reliably the field will shape itself to match it. This is why synchronicity is not a reward. It's a diagnostic. It tells you what you're actually broadcasting. When unexpected ease begins showing up, when patterns break without effort, when alignment seems effortless, that's not luck. That's resonance stabilizing. That's the mirror cleaning itself because your signals stopped flickering. But it works both ways. If chaos repeats, if people mirror your wounds, if delays multiply, the mirror is reflecting confusion, contradiction, or misalignment. Not to punish you, to show you, to wake you up. You're not failing. You're watching your vibration projected back at you. And if you can read it, you can redirect it. Thoth initiates that clarity is the greatest magic. When your mind breath, emotion, and intention align into a single stream, the mirror reacts instantly. It's not metaphor. It's mechanics. The field, at a quantum level, collapses probability around coherence. That means the more stable your inner state, the less random your reality becomes. Synchronicities multiply, not because you're special, but because you're ordered. The quantum mirror doesn't care what you want. It reflects what you are. But once you become aware of this reflection, you move from victim to decoder. You stop asking why things happen and start noticing how they follow your emotional geometry. You trace the origin of the signal. You refine the broadcast and the mirror shifts again. This is how the awakened live. They don't chase signs. They emit signals, and reality bends accordingly. Not by control, by congruency. But the field doesn't always reflect alignment to reassure you. Sometimes it rearranges specifically to test your awareness, to see if you're truly awake or simply repeating a new loop with prettier symbols. The next topic reveals how synchronicities can be structured as traps, designed to expose the parts of you still operating in unconscious automation. 10. How the field rearranges to test your awareness. Not all synchronicities are signs to follow. Some are placed to test whether you're truly awake or simply hallucinating progress. Thoth taught that the field is not just a mirror. It is an intelligence, a conscious system of feedback, reflection, and recalibration. It adapts not only to your alignment, but to your depth of awareness. And when your growth reaches certain thresholds, the field doesn't just support you, it begins to test you. That's when synchronicities stop being obvious guidance and start becoming puzzles. Contradictions appear. Mixed signals show up. Something looks aligned, but feels off. A door opens, but stepping through it brings contraction. That's not failure. That's refinement. The field is asking, are you seeing clearly or projecting what you want to see? This is the stage where many lose themselves. They assume all signs are confirmations. All ease is alignment. All patterns are green lights, but not every signal is meant to be followed. Some are echoes of your old programming, surfacing as bait, familiar feelings in new clothing, opportunities that look expansive but recreate the same loops. The field rearranges these options, not to trick you, but to reveal the parts of you still hypnotized by repetition. Thoth called this phase the mirror of inversion, when the field reflects what you think you've healed to see if it still seduces your nervous system. It presents a new version of the same test, slightly upgraded, slightly disguised, and only the present observer will recognize it. The pattern, the tension, the pull, not as guidance, but as hecho. To navigate this layer of synchronicity, emotional neutrality is essential. You must learn to pause before reacting to alignment. Just because something matches your desire doesn't mean it matches your frequency. The field will test your discernment with too good timing, almost right people, and comfort wrapped in symbolism. And if you follow without sensing, you'll find yourself looping again, but with better lighting. These aren't traps in the negative sense. They're invitations to anchor your clarity. The field wants to know, can you feel truth when it's subtle? Can you choose expansion over familiarity? Can you walk away from symbolic validation if it contradicts inner coherence? You are not here to be led by signs. You are here to be trained by them. Because once you pass the awareness tests, something changes permanently. The field stops throwing old echoes at you. Your timeline matures, and synchronicities begin arriving not as tests, but as creative confirmations of your authorship. But if you miss the signal, ignore the reflection, or follow what wasn't meant to be followed, the consequences don't disappear. The next topic reveals what happens when signs are overlooked, and how ignoring synchronicity causes your intuitive channel to degrade. 11. Signal decay, and the cost of ignoring patterns. Synchronicities don't wait forever. They pulse, repeat, echo, and then fade. Not out of punishment, but because unrecognized signals degrade. Thoth taught that every synchronicity carries a temporal charge, a window of vibrational relevance. If you engage it with awareness, the pattern deepens. If you ignore it, the frequency drops. Not just externally, but inside your intuitive field. This is what few understand. Your ability to perceive signs is not permanent. It's a muscle, a channel, a precision instrument that either sharpens through use or dulls through neglect. Each time you dismiss a clear pattern as coincidence, each time you override a deep intuitive nudge with rational fear, each time you ask for signs and then pretend not to see them, the field adapts. Not to punish you, to match your level of honesty. Signal decay. You stop noticing the repeating numbers. Conversations feel less aligned. You sense something important, but can't place it. The feedback loops dull. Your environment loses that strange pulse it once carried. That's not life going silent. That's the channel going offline because you trained it to believe you weren't listening. Thoth was precise on this. The universe is responsive, not indulgent. It does not flood your perception with signs forever while you half pay attention. It speaks where it's heard. It signals where it's respected. And when it's ignored repeatedly, it turns down the volume. Not because it's gone, but because you've tuned yourself out of resonance. This is why those who once felt guided sometimes feel abandoned. Not because guidance vanished, but because they stopped honoring it when it came. They got distracted, comfortable, or addicted to signs they didn't act on. They became passive receivers, not active integrators. And the system mirrored that back. Disconnection. But the decay isn't permanent. The moment you re-enter stillness, recalibrate your honesty, and acknowledge the signs you've denied, the signal begins to regenerate, like a stream finding its way back through a blocked channel. But it demands something. Follow through. Signs without integration dissolve into noise, and noise kills intuition. If you've been asking for signs, but feel like nothing's showing up anymore, ask yourself, have I honored what already arrived? Have I acted on what I saw? Or did I wait for another sign to confirm the one I already ignored? Synchronicity is not entertainment. It is instruction. And when you treat it as such, the field begins to speak again, clearly, precisely, and consistently. Because sometimes, when the signals return, they come stronger than before, denser, more rapid, because something big is about to shift. The next topic reveals what it means when synchronicities begin clustering tightly and why intense pattern storms often appear just before your reality collapses or transforms. 12. The pattern that appears before a reality collapse. There are moments when synchronicities stop arriving quietly. They cluster, intensify, multiply. Across days or hours, numbers hit you from every direction. Conversations echo back to back. Dreams repeat with eerie accuracy. The world feels scripted, too exact to be accidental. This isn't random overflow. This is a density spike in the field, and it almost always precedes a rupture. Thoth taught that before a major reality collapse or breakthrough, the matrix amplifies its signals to full volume. Not because you're about to be rewarded, because you're about to be shifted. A pattern storm is not confirmation. It's preparation. The field is trying to stabilize your awareness before something irreversible happens. This is the final mirror, the one that reflects not just what you've been choosing, but what you've been becoming. These moments are rare and sacred, and most miss them because they misread them as encouragement. But signs, aren't they always salingo? Sometimes they're saying, wake up. Now, when synchronicities come in waves, repeated names, phrases, timelines, sensations, symbols, people, the system is compressing information. It knows time is about to bend. Something you've resisted seeing is about to surface, or something you've silently prepared for is about to begin. This convergence can feel overwhelming. You may feel hyperaware, like time is slowing down while everything accelerates. You may feel unable to sleep, or flooded with emotion, or deeply still. All of these are signs that the fabric of your current reality is destabilizing, either through alignment, collapse, or both. This isn't danger. It's passage, but it will feel like both. Because your nervous system is entering the liminal zone, where identity, timelines, and emotional loops are either transcended or repeated. And if you're not fully present, the loop restarts. Thoth called this the crossroads of reflection. A moment when the field gives you one last, clear echo of who you've been, and then asks, are you still this version of yourself? The decision you make in this window shapes everything. Do you cling? Do you avoid? Do you ask for another sign, instead of acting on the one that just echoed 10 times? Or do you respond with alignment, calmly, clearly, without panic or hesitation? You can't control what collapses, but you can control who you are when it does. And that defines what emerges from the other side. When the field speaks louder than ever, it's not trying to amaze you, it's trying to prepare you. Because the identity you're holding now may not pass through the doorway you're standing in front of. The next topic reveals something most never consider. That synchronicities are not orders. They are invitations, and misreading them as divine commands can fracture your power instead of expanding it. 13. Synchronicity as an invitation, not a command. Not every sign is a yes. Not every alignment is a directive. Thoth taught that synchronicity is a conversation, not a commandment. The field does not force. It reflects. It opens a doorway and waits. Synchronicity is not here to control your path. It's here to reveal your position, offer possibility, and ask one quiet question. Will you choose with clarity or react with attachment? Most people misinterpret synchronicities as absolute guidance. A repeated number means they must proceed. A dream symbol confirms they should stay. A strange encounter means they've found their person. This creates spiritual dependency, disguised as intuition. They stop discerning. They start following blindly. They give their power away to patterns they don't yet understand. The truth is this: synchronicity is never here to override your will. It is a mirror, offering information, a suggestion, a signal that you are standing inside a choice point, but you must bring the authorship. If not, you surrender your creative power in favor of external permission. Thoth warned that one of the greatest traps of spiritual perception is turning synchronicity into superstition. When signs become orders, fear hides beneath them. The fear of choosing, the fear of being wrong, the fear of losing alignment if a step is missed. But you cannot lose what you consciously author, and you cannot expand through patterns you refuse to question. So, how do you respond? With stillness. When a sign appears, don't react. Feel. Discern. Ask yourself, does this resonate cleanly? Or am I attaching meaning to fill a void? Ask, what would I choose? Without the sign, ask, does this sign align with who I'm becoming? Or with the version of me I'm afraid to outgrow? Synchronicities are neutral until you engage them. Your emotional state defines their trajectory. A sign seen in fear leads to avoidance. A sign seen in presence leads to insight. The same symbol can empower or mislead depending on your internal stance. That's why the sign is never the source of power. You are. This is what Thoth called mirror mastery, the ability to observe the reflection without losing identity inside it. You see the pattern, feel the pulse, and still decide, not as a servant of signals, but as a sovereign in dialogue with reality. The deeper you understand this, the more your signs change in tone. They become gentler, less intrusive, more elegant, because the field knows it no longer needs to shout. You're listening, but you're not enslaved to meaning. You're in command of it. And when that balance locks in, when you see synchronicities not as commands, but as interactive language, you stop waiting for permission and start writing the conversation yourself. The next topic reveals what happens when you begin generating synchronicities. Instead of chasing them, how your entire life becomes a language, and how every action starts shaping the field like a sentence in motion. 14. Becoming the decoder. Turning life into language. There comes a moment when the script flips. You stop chasing synchronicities and start generating them. The world no longer feels like a mystery you're trying to interpret. It becomes a language you're fluently speaking. Thoth thought that this is the turning point where the seeker becomes the architect. You don't just see patterns, you shape them. You don't wait for alignment. You create it with intention, breath, and presence. This doesn't mean controlling the field. It means co-authoring with it. Every thought becomes syntax. Every action a phrase. Every emotional state is a punctuation mark. Altering how your reality speaks back to you. You begin to notice that when you move from coherence, life responds with elegance. When your attention is clean, environments reorganize. When you speak with alignment, people answer questions you haven't asked. This is not magic. This is linguistic authorship, using your consciousness to speak in the frequency language the matrix understands. Intention becomes grammar. Stillness becomes spacing. Emotional resonance becomes tone. What was once chaos becomes readable, predictable, and eventually malleable. In this state, synchronicity stops feeling surprising. It becomes confirmation, a quiet nod from the system that says, you're coding the field accurately. The symbols you once obsessed over now arrive like punctuation, clean, calm, consistent. They show that your narrative is unfolding in rhythm, but it also comes with responsibility, because the field now responds faster. Misalignment gets mirrored quicker. Delay reflects immediately. You've moved into a space of real-time feedback, where thought becomes form with less friction, and that requires you to remain anchored. Not perfect, but precise. This level of decoding means you no longer need signs to prove anything. You use them to adjust your path, not to validate your identity. You see the patterns without becoming them. You engage the reflections without reacting blindly. Life becomes a conscious exchange, and you stop living reactively. You begin narrating your own timeline. Thoth called this described state, when your awareness has matured enough to leave the temple of waiting and enter the world as a walking conduit of alignment. Every word you speak carries ripple. Every silence you hold becomes architecture. You don't announce this shift. You embody it, and the field responds accordingly. And soon, you recognize the deepest truth in all of this. You were never here to receive signs passively. You were the signal all along. The next and final topic closes this journey by revealing what happens when you finally realize that your existence is the original activation code and the world has always been responding to you. 15. You were the signal all along. It was never about the numbers. Not the 11:11 on the clock. Not the stranger who said the right thing at the right time. Not the song that played when you were questioning everything. These were never the source. Only the reflection. The truth is far more intimate, more radical, more unsettling for the ego. You were the signal all along. Thoth taught that consciousness emits a resonance long before the personality forms a question. Before the mind creates a thought, before the voice whispers a desire. The moment you feel, you transmit, and the universe, this sentient mirror of potential, responds instantly, not just with external events, but with structural rearrangement. Every synchronicity was not a clue from outside. It was a response to your own frequency shift, a boomerang of your inner field. You didn't stumble upon a sign. You emitted a change so strong that the environment had no choice but to reflect it. That's why the more honest you become, the faster signs arrive. That's why, when you're centered, the world organizes around you. You never had to look for meaning in the noise. You were the meaning. You never had to chase messages. You were the message being decoded by the mirror of matter. The field has always been adjusting to your vibration, not because you're the center of the universe, but because you are a fractal of it, speaking in resonance, not words. This realization doesn't inflate the self, it silences Italiano. Because when you grasp the magnitude of being the signal, when you feel the weight of how your inner state codes the field, you become still, not passive. Present. You don't rush decisions. You don't force outcomes. You breathe and watch. You act with clarity, not urgency. Everything that once felt external becomes internalized. You stop blaming the world for what it reflects. You stop asking for signs you're not ready to act on. You stop outsourcing your knowing to coincidences, and something ancient unlocks. A trust that requires no evidence. This is where alignment becomes permanent. Not as a peak state, but as a quiet stance. Not as performance, but as presence. The signs still arrive, but you don't bow to them. You recognize them as echoes of a signal you already chose to embody. You become the still point that organizes reality, the unmoved mover of your own path, the architect of timelines that align not by force, but by frequency integrity. And as you walk, the world whispers back, not because it is guiding you, but because it's following you. Because when you truly realize you are the signal, you stop waiting for the path to appear, and you start walking as if every step creates it. This is the end of searching, the end of decoding, the end of doubt. Because the decoder, the pattern, the architect, it was never outside. It was always you. Now, let the transmission settle. And if these words reach something buried inside you, it's not because they're special. It's because you were already tuned in. You simply remembered what was never lost. The language of you. If you wish, let the signal echo by sharing this with someone else who's ready to stop following and start emanating. And if you're meant to continue decoding with me, ILLB. Right here, not ahead of you, but beside you, in the silence between each synchronicity. 16. The fractal trail. How synchronicities layer across lifetimes. There are patterns that appear in your life, which cannot be traced to this lifetime alone. You feel an unexplainable pull to certain names, certain cities, certain numbers or historical eras, as if your spirit is decoding a puzzle that began before your current body ever existed. This is not imagination, it is memory, resurfacing through the only way the present moment allows. Synchronicities layered across time. Thoth spoke of the Akashic pattern not as a book, but as a living, breathing fractal, an unfolding record of every emotional imprint, every decision, every unfinished cycle your soul has ever carried. And when a cycle is ready to be reopened or resolved, the universe begins to echo. You begin to see strange alignments. The same symbol on two unrelated doors, a word that keeps returning in conversations. A country you've never visited but dream about often. These are not simply messages. These are thread points, pulling you back into a pattern that is demanding attention. The invisible reality of synchronicities is not only quantum, it is also reincarnational. Some of the signals you're decoding now were set in motion hundreds of years ago, from a self you no longer remember. That's why some signs hit you harder than they should. They don't just resonate with your current circumstances. They resonate with your entire soul field. They feel heavy because they're old. They feel urgent because they are sacred. They feel mysterious because you haven't yet remembered who first sent them. But you don't need past life regression to decode them. The field is intelligent. It only sends you symbols when you're ready to act on them. If you're seeing signs from ancient fragments of your own path, it means you now have the frequency, the tools, and the sovereignty to resolve them. That's why they resurface now, not as memories, but as signals. The field doesn't use language from your past. It uses the language of today to echo the unfinished of yesterday. And yet, most people dismiss these as coincidence. They miss the opportunity to liberate themselves from soul contracts and emotional karma simply because the signs were subtle, poetic, abstract. But reality doesn't speak in loud voices. It speaks in mirrors, numbers, names, echoes. It speaks in songs that make you cry for no reason. It speaks in street names that feel oddly familiar. It speaks in timelines asking to be rewritten from a new level of awareness. To live as a decoder means accepting that not every sign is about your current moment. Some are messages from your soul's echo, reminding you of promises made long ago. And when you follow them with discernment, when you act from presence and not from fear, you begin to collapse timelines, freeing yourself from unfinished loops that silently governed your choices. You feel the weight of something shift. You no longer repeat certain patterns. You stop attracting the same kinds of people. You feel clean without needing to know exactly what was resolved. That's the power of synchronicities. They don't always reveal the full story, but they shift it quietly, permanently. And soon, your life begins to feel lighter, not because you've escaped your path, but because you've walked far enough into it that the past no longer chases you. You didn't just notice the signs, you acted on them. You honored the echo. You closed a loop. And the field, it responds. 17. The moment the signal replaces the voice, there comes a moment when you no longer ask for signs. Not because you no longer believe in them, but because you've become what they were pointing to all along. This moment doesn't come with fireworks. It doesn't come with confirmation. It comes in silence. And in that silence, something irreversible happens. You stop needing the world to speak to you in echoes, because your own presence becomes louder than the signal. This is not the rejection of synchronicity. It is the final merging with it. You don't walk away from numbers, symbols, strange alignments. You simply stop chasing them. You stop interpreting every event as a hidden code. You stop depending on signs to validate your path. Because now, you walk as someone who knows the path bends to the one who walks it with clarity. Thoth warned of the final test of the awakened. The temptation to turn synchronicity into a superstition, to rely so heavily on external confirmation that you forget the source of the signal was always internal. He taught that synchronicities are sacred. Yes, but only when they point back inward. Only when they remind you of your own coherence, not your doubt. The moment the signal replaces the voice is the moment when the external symbols become optional. You still see them. You still smile when they appear. But you no longer wait for them. You no longer pause your decisions until 11:11 shows up. You no longer stall your growth because the universe hasn't spoken. Because now, your presence is the voice. This is where the game changes. You walk into situations with stillness, not questions. You look at the repeating numbers and say thank you, but you act from sovereignty, not dependency. The numbers confirm, but they no longer dictate. The symbols harmonize, but they no longer command. The people who appear with perfect timing still matter, but you no longer believe they are more connected than you. You recognize your own authority in the field, and then something even more powerful begins to unfold. Synchronicities don't stop. They accelerate. But without the need for interpretation, you walk into alignment after alignment, not because you deciphered a message, but because you've become the message. Your thoughts are clean. Your emotions are coherent. Your presence is anchored. You no longer magnetize signals to guide you. You generate clarity so strong that reality can't help but arrange itself around it. You don't ask for signs. You create environments where signs are inevitable. This is not a higher level. It's a deeper embodiment. It's not superiority. It's simplicity. You don't feel mystical or enlightened. You feel real, grounded, clear. Your emotions are not weapons. Your thoughts are not spirals. Your breath is not rushed. And in that rhythm, the field begins to match you in real time. Without delay, you start noticing things before they happen. Not predicting them, creating them by the way you move. The field doesn't surprise you. It reflects you. You start seeing people respond to your silence. Situations open not because of effort, but because of energetic transparency. The invisible becomes visible, not through signs, but through presence. Not through messages, but through magnetism. And when a synchronicity appears now, you don't worship it, you nod. You recognize it as something you've already decided. You say, without saying, course, it's here. I'm in rhythm. This is the final code. This is what the language of the universe has always tried to teach. You are not here to read reality. You are here to write it. And when your vibration becomes the pen, the world becomes your script. The signal doesn't disappear. It becomes you. Now, the choice is yours.